Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Xony, and today we're going to have some more stories from Reddit. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further, let's go. Now let's get into today's stories to find out what happened. My wife and I were married for about 4 years before our divorce. I thought we were madly in love with each other. She was my favorite person, my best friend, and the love of my life. I don't understand how things turned out the way that they did, but I'm trying to work through them as best as I can. When we met, we fell hard and fast for each other. A mutual friend introduced us because they thought we would have a lot to talk about. We ended up leaving the party we were at that night together, and we barely spent a day apart since. I'd never been able to picture a future with a woman until I met her. She completely changed how I felt about love and relationships. We got married after 2 years of being together, and it was all picture perfect. My wife was always somewhat of a flirt. It bothered me when we were together, but I convinced myself that it was just her being friendly with people. I figured that as long as she was coming home to me at the end of the day, it wasn't that big of a deal. I've dated a lot of women, but one of my fatal flaws as a bachelor was how clueless I was when women were coming on to me. I had countless friends always telling me that a woman was hitting on me when I didn't even notice. So, when I invited a friend from work over for dinner one night, and my wife saw how she was acting toward me, we had a conversation. My wife told me that the friend from work was obviously into me, and she was nervous about our relationship. I assured her that she was the only woman for me and that I hadn't even noticed the woman was flirting with me. She listened to what I said, but she needed to see proof of it for herself. We had a long conversation that night about boundaries and having the ability to look through the other's phone when needed. I gave her my information, and she looked through my text message exchanges with my coworker, and she found nothing suspicious. She gave me her cell phone information, and I briefly looked at her phone, but I didn't really have anything to look for. There was a point when my wife started spending a little of time at work after hours. I didn't question it because I knew she was trying to put in the work to get a big promotion. It was extremely competitive as well, so she needed to have a leg up on some of the people she was competing for it with. She would come home exhausted and hop right in the shower before going to bed. She never wanted to tell me about work when she got home, and I assumed that was because she was stressed and exhausted from everything. She kept doing that for about 3 weeks until she came home furious one evening because she didn't get the promotion. She just kept yelling about how hard she worked and how she was doing things nobody else was doing because she wanted it so badly. She made it seem like it was a boys' club at the office, and the only reason she didn't get the promotion was because she was a woman. I was angry on her behalf. I knew that she was smart and very dedicated to her job, and if they weren't promoting her because she was a woman, that was not only unfair but illegal. When I saw how upset she was, I was encouraging her to quit her job and go somewhere where she would be appreciated. Several weeks went by and things started to go back to normal with her. She was annoyed that she didn't get the promotion, but she sucked it up and went back to work as she always had. I was working from home one afternoon when I got an Amber Alert notification on my phone. The alert freaked me out, so I swiped it away very quickly to make the sound disappear. However, I could hear the alert going off from somewhere under my bed. I was confused about that. Right away, I got up and started digging through some of the bags and storage containers. We kept under there to find out where it was coming from. I found an old tote bag hidden inside a plastic storage container with a cheap cell phone inside. It was turned on and had about half the battery life remaining. I got rid of the Amber Alert notification and just stared at the phone, confused about why it was there. My wife and I were on the same phone plan, and I knew that she had an iPhone, not some chintzy little plastic phone. For a second, I assumed it was probably just an old phone of hers, but that didn't explain why it was on and had battery life to it. I unlocked it and took a quick look through it to see what was going on with this phone. I could see that it was on silent mode, so had it not been for the Amber Alert, I wouldn't have even known it was there. Aside from a few missed calls from toll call numbers, there was only one number that was frequently called and texted. I recognized the name right away. It was one of my wife's co-workers, let's call him Chris. We would invite Chris and his wife over for dinner often. We went on double dates with them. They had their first baby on the way and everything. I took a deep breath and I looked through the messages. It was clear they were having an affair. They had been exchanging pictures with each other and talking about what they were going to do with each other the next time they could be alone. There were messages where Chris told my wife that he was thinking about her when he was sleeping with his wife. My wife would reply by sending him a picture of her topless or something like that. They made plans together to both stay late after work and beat with each other. The more I scrolled through the messages, I realized that there was never a promotion that my wife was trying to get. She had come up with a very elaborate line to cover for what she was really doing after work. I completely believed it too. I was heartbroken by what I found. My wife was the woman of my dreams, and I was over the moon to be with her, and I found out that she was cheating on me. I almost wanted to put the phone back and pretend like I hadn't found anything out. But I knew I couldn't do that. How was I supposed to look at her the same way after I knew what she had done? I was going to have to divorce her, and the idea of that was heart-wrenching. I got back to my computer and immediately started looking up some information about divorce. While I was doing that, my wife texted me and told me that she would be staying late at work again because she needed to prepare for a meeting the next day. After what I'd seen, I knew it was a lie. I hadn't been angry up until that point. I was sad and defeated, but when she lied to me again and I knew what was really happening, I was furious. I thought over what I wanted to do for a few minutes before an idea struck me. I called Chris's wife and I asked her if they wanted to come over for dinner that night. She told me it sounded great, but Chris was staying late at work. I told her we would schedule it for another time and hung up. About 10 minutes later, I texted her and told her that my wife was staying late too. I suggested that we be supportive, caring partners, and grab some takeout and bring it to them. She was all for that idea. We met up around 5:30, went to grab some Chinese food, and drove together to the office where our partners worked. I knew that we would likely be walking into both of them having sex, and I was nervous to see it. I started to feel bad that I had involved Chris' wife in all of this. She certainly didn't need to see what was about to happen. Unfortunately, it was too late to go back. We got to their office about 45 minutes after everybody would have normally left for the day. There were a couple of cars in the parking lot. One of them I recognized right away was my wife's. Both of us went inside and took the elevator up to the office where our partners worked. When the elevator door opened, we could hear the sounds of people having sex. They weren't really making much of an effort to hide what they were doing. I was surprised that his wife immediately dropped the food on the ground and stormed through the office to see what was happening. I let her lead the way and she brought us to a small conference room where both of our partners were completely naked and on the floor having sex. She slammed the door open and walked over to her husband, pulling him off my wife's by his hair. Chris saw her and started immediately trying to apologize and explain what was happening. My wife immediately stood up and tried to get dressed. I didn't say anything, instead I just turned around and walked away. I knew exactly what I was going to be walking into, but part of me wished that I had hallucinated everything or something like that. My wife got dressed and followed me out of the office, begging me to stop and listen to her. I stopped and I gave her a moment to try and explain what was happening. She told me that they had been working late at the office one night and it just happened. They were just having sex and that was all there was. She told me that she still loved me more than anything in the world and didn't want to lose me, but she wasn't happy with monogamy. I didn't want to listen to what she was saying, so I just left. I waited by the car for Chris's wife so we could leave together. She was extremely upset when she got in. and was just crying about how he was the one who wanted a baby, and that was how he was going to act after she was pregnant. I felt even worse for her than I did for myself as she was talking. I finally got home after dropping her off, and I packed a bag for myself to go stay at a hotel. I couldn't stand to be around my wife after that. I contacted a divorce attorney, and we got the paperwork ready to be filed. As soon as it was ready, I gave it to her. She tried as hard as she could to convince me to stay with her and pursue an ethically non-monogamous lifestyle with her. She told me that would mean I could sleep with other women like that, was an incentive for me to forgive everything she had done. I didn't want that. I didn't want to be with other women, I wanted to be with my wife, who I thought I loved. We ended up getting divorced, and I was awarded our house. I didn't want to live in the house that I shared so many memories with her in, so I ended up selling it. Chris and his wife also divorced. Their divorce was a lot messier than ours, because there was a child in the picture, and they had to go through custody. But the wife was awarded full custody of their kid, and she got to keep their house. Plus, he had to pay her spousal support and child support. On top of that, they were both let go from their job after I informed their employer that they were staying late at work to have sex in the office. I haven't spoken to my wife since the divorce, so I don't know if she's found another job or if she is still looking. All I know is that she's not going to be able to use her previous job as a reference because of how she was terminated. Now let's get into the second story. My girlfriend and I both met during our freshman orientation at our university. There was this week-long event for first-year students, and she and I were in the same orientation group. My girlfriend and I just clicked, and we spent a lot of time together. There was a dance for the freshmen at the end of the orientation week, and I went with her as my date. We actually both had a date and ended up losing our virginity to each other later that night. Looking back, it was really embarrassing, but it was also pretty sweet. We dated for 2 years while we were in college. I really loved her. Neither of us was in a place to even think about getting married or starting a life together, but we were comfortable with each other. Our university had a vibrant Greek life scene. I have always thought fraternities and sororities were weird, so I had absolutely no intention of joining one. My girlfriend, on the other hand, had been dreaming about joining a specific sorority for years. When she picked out what college she was going to, she knew that she wanted to rush that sorority as soon as she had the chance. During the summer between the first and second year, she rushed the sorority that she wanted and ended up getting in. I was happy for her because I knew it was something that she had really been looking forward to. But I was a little uneasy about the idea of it. This specific sorority was a prime example of why I hated them. Everyone there was like a clone of the others. Her schedule was always so full of things that she was doing with the sorority and her classwork that I rarely got to see her. She was always going to parties, fundraisers, and campus events that the sorority had been planning. I felt like I was getting left behind in some ways. Before, we would talk every day. But after she joined, we barely even texted each other. We finally got together one day for lunch and I addressed my concerns to her. She told me that it was only temporary and that as soon as she was fully settled in the sorority things, we'd get back to normal. The last thing she wanted was to break up with me, she said. During that lunch, she started telling me about some of the crazy rules that the sorority had. They expected that their sorority sisters would behave in such a way to positively represent the sorority to prospective members. That meant the way they dressed had to be a certain way. They couldn't go out with certain kinds of men and they needed to be treated well. To uphold the values of the sorority at all times. Several weeks went by and things between my girlfriend and I weren't improving. I still cared for her and I wanted to be with her, but there was so much distance between us just because she joined that sorority. I didn't want to be the person to tell her not to join or give her an ultimatum, but it was very stressful for me. She texted me one night and invited me to a big frat party that was held annually. Again, I can't stress this enough. I hate Greek life and I had no desire to go to that party. However, I wanted to see my girlfriend. I had a work-study on campus to help with some events that went on for the undergrads on the weekends, so I told her that I would be there if I could get out of work early. At the beginning of the night, it really wasn't looking like I was going to be able to sew. I texted my girlfriend and told her that. However, the movie that I was screening for the students was not very good and a lot of people ended up walking out before it was over. I was able to end my shift very early and I figured I would go and see my girlfriend at the party. It was very crowded when I got there and I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know anybody at the party and I was just looking for my girlfriend. I recognized a couple of the other girls from her sorority, but I didn't feel very comfortable going up to them to talk. I walked around the fraternity house and looked for my girlfriend. I made it to the top floor where there were a few bedrooms. I opened a couple of doors and peeked inside to see if she was there. I was really hoping that she wasn't because the idea of her being in a bedroom in a frat house made me very nervous. I really liked her and I didn't want to get my heart broken over what might be happening behind those closed doors. Unfortunately, it was exactly what I was afraid of. I opened one of the doors and found my girlfriend kissing one guy with another guy behind her kissing her neck. She was topless and they were all three clearly about to have sex. I just stood there for a minute in shock as I watched. The guy behind my girlfriend actually saw me and yelled at me to get out. That's when my girlfriend opened her eyes and looked at me and rushed to the door to talk to me. I just slammed the door shut in her face and made my way out of the frat house to go back to my room. She was blowing up my phone and trying to get through to me, but I didn't respond. I was hurt by what I saw. Part of me had expected it when I was walking through the hallway. But I was hoping it wasn't going to be real. There had been a lot of distance growing between us since the beginning of the semester and I guess I knew that we weren't going to last forever, but being cheated on really hurts. In the morning I sent her a text message and told her that I didn't want to hear any explanations from her and that we were over. There was no excuse that she could have given me that would have made what she did okay. I blocked her number and spent a few days sulking over it before I decided to get back to my normal life. My mind kept wandering back to the code of conduct that she showed me over lunch a few weeks prior. With all of the ridiculous rules, I couldn't help but think that cheating on your boyfriend and having a threesome with two frat guys would be some kind of violation of the sorority's values. I knew how much being in that sorority meant to her, and I wanted to hurt her and get revenge in some way. I ended up reaching out to the president of the sorority on Facebook and telling her exactly what happened. I didn't really think it would do anything, but if it could sully her reputation, that was enough for me. The president of the sorority just left me on read. A couple of weeks later, I got an email from my ex-girlfriend cursing me out. I guessed when I told the president about what happened, she decided to tell a lot of other sorority members. Everybody hence started gossiping about her and talking about what she did, and the rumors were spreading throughout the sorority. She felt so uncomfortable that she ended up leaving. She blamed me for it and told me about a whole host of opportunities she was going to be missing out on because she was no longer in that sorority. I don't know if she thought I was going to feel bad about it or what, but I didn't. In my eyes, that was just the consequences of her actions. If there were jobs that she would miss out on after college, that was entirely her own fault, not mine. I ended up blocking her email as well and not talking to her for the rest of the time I was in college. There was a brief incident where we were actually in a class together. We realized that on the first day, but when I went back for the next class, she wasn't there. I can only assume she dropped the class because we were in it together.